Fun fact about me, I love football and getting really excited about the Super Bowl. But after so many years of watching the game, it really stands out to me how many life lessons you can learn just from the game. I mean, it's as simple as, the power of teamwork, giving your best no matter what, leadership, and winning and losing well. Well, my guest today has lived these lessons not only in life, but on the field. Matt Mayberry is the former linebacker for the Chicago Bears, and I am so excited to be talking with him today. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you for having me. Honored to be here.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about your career and how you made this transition.
Yeah, so I made this, I tell people all the time, one of the probably most popular questions I get was, did I have this planned? Whether I had an 8-year NFL career or whether I had a one game preseason game career, which that wasn't my case. And my resounding answer to that is always just, no, it was never planned. So my journey, it really started for the foundational basis of our conversation and at least some context for the listeners. I had a very powerful coach in college. His name was Terry Hepner. And really everything that I learned about leadership and the importance of building a culture and really what is culture, right? I think that's a huge misconception, came directly from that man. So I learned so much, had a great career in college at Indiana University. And then I went, did have an opportunity to play for the hometown team, the Chicago Bears. And, working my way up from fourth team and all the way behind on the depth chart as an undrafted free agent, I didn't sign the first, second round, guaranteed $10 million. My life was set. So I really had to work at it and nothing was promised to me. So even with me having a great training camp and everything was kind of working in my favor along the way, I got hurt in my very first game, a preseason game in sunny San Diego, California. Long story short, I tore a bone off my ankle. I wasn't able to come back from that particular injury. And I was depressed. I thought about suicide. I thought about ending my life. Luckily, I didn't go through and carry out those plans that I thought about. But that was a huge defining moment in my life, because even though you cannot control getting hurt in a very physical game, a violent game like the game of football, but I viewed that as such a big failure in my life. I viewed that as such a big heartbreak. And it was so hard for me to kind of get rid of that identity because I really was a football player my whole entire life. So when you're known as Matt the football player, and then that is kind of stripped from you, psychologically and mentally, I mean, it really destroyed me. And how I got in to specifically answer your question, I got asked to speak probably a couple months after that particular, that moment, right? When even in the back of my mind, I thought one day I'm still going to go back to playing football. I'm going to heal my ankle and go back. I got asked to speak at a leadership event by Stedman Graham, who's Oprah Winfrey's boyfriend for a very long time. And at first I was like, not a chance. I'm injured right now. I have a walking boot on, crutches. My future, I have no idea what's in store for my future. I don't want to do it. Long story short, I went through with that event, and that event changed my life. That event, even though I spoke that particular event for 20 or so minutes, really sharing not only my journey, but how does the game of football apply to business? How does the game of football teach you about thriving in every area of your life? The mentality, the preparation that's required. Because whether you're a 10-year NFL superstar like Tom Brady and some of the NFL greats that probably is running through everyone's mind, even making it to high-level Division I college football, what's required of that and what are the learning lessons? And that was kind of the basis, starting point for me getting involved in that space. And by delivering that one speech, everything from there was a domino effect.
That is fascinating. So you did that one speech. Were there people in the audience who were then like, oh, I want more, so will you come and speak to my people?
That's exactly what happened. Even though I thought that first speech I ever gave, when I kid you not, I got a D in public speaking in college. Part of that was because I didn't apply myself, but I did not give what I would classify as a great, moving, compelling speech. But I spoke from the heart, and I think that really had a lot to do with it. But there was an executive in the audience at a big Fortune 100 company, and he said, "Hey, I'm having a leadership and sales meeting in Vegas next month. I would love for you to come to that meeting." And I kind of approached the situation where, well, I got nothing else going on right now, so sure, why not? And then from there, word started getting out, and that's really what started my whole journey of, speaking, writing, and now I do a lot of consulting as well. But it was that one particular moment, what I deemed as one of the biggest failures in my life that really gave birth to my next career.
So what do you see as the biggest differences between success on the football field and success in the business area?
I'll be honest with you. I mean, I thought a lot about this, and I still think a lot about it. Even just watching the playoffs right now, and you mentioned I'm a football fan, right? Just like yourself now, being a former athlete for most of my life, but just being a fan of the game, and just analyzing how, sometimes every year you have that one team that pulls through, that they might not have the best talent, they don't have the biggest payroll, but they play as a unified team. They click on all cylinders. They have a healthy culture that really promotes high performance. I really believe, and I've thought about this. Obviously, there's different layers to winning in the marketplace, and depending what sector and industry you're in, but the similarities of what it takes to win in the game of football and what it takes to win in business are almost identical. You need a thriving leadership team. You need to build a healthy, high-performing culture that promotes the winning behaviors and mindsets that you need to win on the field and in the boardroom or in the marketplace. And then from there, you got to be able to be nimble, agile. You got to adapt to adversity. You got to pick teammates up. You got to lead with vulnerability and transparency to get home those coaching and teaching points. Really, what the foundation of all great NFL teams do, and that also applies in the business world, is what really I've seen for the past 12 years of doing this work that I do now.
Now, what I hear you saying is that a huge part of this is a mind game. So talk a little more about the mind game of leadership and success in business.
That's a fantastic question. One that I'm actually, it's unfortunate it's not asked often enough. I think that at the end of the day, and I think Tom Peters was the one that first said this, that the old soft skills are the new hard skills. And I couldn't agree with that more. And I think a lot of times when people hear that, they say, well, then you're just discounting the importance of the competencies and skill sets to win in the workplace and be an effective leader and, drive transformation and change. But what I've discovered over the years is that, and this is very relevant for even the best football teams, you can teach around the competencies, you can teach around the skill sets. Yes, you want to hire and bring people into your organization that already have those skill sets, right? Just like an NFL team, they want to take the best talent. But at the end of the day, what's even more so important is, do they understand the foundational core of who we are as an organization or as a team? And can they play to that cultural aspect of driving of where we want to go as a team and organization? And particularly, are you self-centered? Do you operate out of ego, or is it for the betterment of the team? Understanding that if I make the team better, some way, somehow that is directly going to impact me, right? The team that wins the Super Bowl this year, all of those players hitting free agency, they're likely going to sign a contract that they likely wouldn't have if they didn't win the Super Bowl, outside of a few star players. You're going to get more attendance the following year, so the whole organization benefits. Jersey sales are going to increase, which all the players get, part of the proceeds from that, right? So it's understanding those intrinsic motivators and kind of the core aspects, the foundational core of what makes a team, and the same applies in the business world. And I think at the end of the day, it's so much a mental game of understanding that, I can do all the strategy and the game plan and all of this, but I need to understand the mental aspect is front and center. And if I lose it in my mind, I'm going to lose in the field or in the marketplace. And the best leaders in the business world understand that. That's why they're lifelong learners. They never stop working on their mind. And in my life as a former athlete, even though I didn't have the NFL career that I once envisioned, I learned so many valuable things from the greatest football players I've been around. As far as they're great on the football field, but where they're even greater is winning the battle of their mind first and foremost. And that foundational core is understanding people, understanding that, how can I inspire? How can I lead with empathy and vulnerability, understanding that when the team wins, I win.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love what you said about the soft skills are the new hard skills. That's a really interesting perspective. Now, in all of this, you're talking also about leadership and culture. So I want to talk about both, but let's start with leadership. Would you say that leadership is something that you're born with, or is it something that can be developed?
Another fantastic question, and I actually say in the book, I remember a conversation very vividly. I was working with an organization on their leadership development, efforts internally. We were crafting out a 6-month strategy program of taking their kind of, their core business strategy of what they want to, do in the marketplace for this particular year, but then also take the competencies and skill sets from a leadership perspective and how do we connect the two? That's a lot of the work that I do outside of the cultural transformations and changes that I do for organizations. But during that conversation with that HR leader, they said something that I blatantly just flat out disagreed with. And what they said was, we spend so much time talking about leaders and how we have more managers than leaders, and we need to take more managers and build them and cultivate them into becoming a leader. But the fact is you're either born a leader or you're not. An HR leader said this to me. And I just stopped in that particular moment and I flat out just disagreed. Because even with this book and some of the leaders that my upcoming book, Culture is the Way, that releases February 1st, throughout the book, I interview and talk to some of these unbelievable leaders throughout the book, and just getting their insights. In almost every single interaction and conversation I had, at some point in time, they said, I am the different kind of leader I am today than I was 10 or 20 years ago. When I was first hired on the job, I was not prepared, I was not ready, and I do not have the competency and skill set to kind of drive the transformation and change that I've been able to do throughout my 25 or 30 year, 40 year career, whatever that may be. And every single one of them said that with the intentionality around wanting to become a great leader, what does that look like? Understanding the people aspect of building a people first organization. And then also, how does that tie into winning? I was able to grow and get better as a leader. But every single one of them said that I was not the leader I am today that I was, 10 or 20 years ago. And they were talking about their evolution and growth. So to flat out answer your question, deeply at my core, I really believe that, yes, some people are born with a natural tendency to communicate and inspire. But at the end of the day, if you want to become a leader, if you want to impact people and make change, make a meaningful, extraordinary difference, you can learn and develop that aspect of your life.
So you just mentioned communication and inspiration. Is that basically what leadership is about?
No. I think that those are very important parts of leadership. I think at the end of the day, what I always like to do and what I even try to do in this book is really, not only define culture, but I think a lot of the conversation around leadership also has to be defined, right? Because I feel like as times continue to move forward and we move through different inflection points and the complexities of the pandemic and kind of where we are right now with the economic uncertainty, I think for almost every year and every decade, right, leadership is going to be different. What happened in the 1990s, more of the command and control approach was in. That is what made a great leader or good management. Where now it really is promoting more of those soft skills. It's working on our D&I efforts. It's building a more inclusive organization. But front and center, you have to understand, and the best football coaches understand this. Leadership is not a title. Leadership has nothing to do with what your business card says. It has nothing to do with where your name is on the company's website. Leadership is determined by your ability to influence and impact another human being. And the best leaders are able to do that at scale. They understand that every single person is different, have different personality types, have different behavioral profiles, and they really get to understand people at its core. And then also they're huge, big proponents of driving the purpose, the very fabric of our organization and why we do what we do. I think the best leaders, very hard to classify in kind of a high level 2-minute overview, but I would say that is the most important aspect, because some of the greatest leaders I've seen, they weren't the CEO. They didn't have this COO title, but their deep level of intentionality of wanting to impact and influence another human being and how that carried over into their day-to-day life was just extraordinary. And it showed in their results.
That's amazing. So really anyone can be a leader. You don't have to have a title. You don't have to be recognized, I guess, by the higher ups. If you're stepping into leadership, then you can make an impact.
Absolutely. And
Okay.
I think, you'll get one of the big things with that though is also, one of the big pushbacks is, well, why would I want to do more work? Or why would I want to go out of my way to, adopt the role of a leader if I'm not getting compensated as being one? Or why would I want to do this if, that's out of my, and at the end of the day, my number one response to that is that that's kind of our role. That's kind of our job as a human being, is to make a difference in society. And even if you don't have that title, right, it's unbelievable the amount of impact that, a manager or even a non-manager has on their ability to how they show up each and every day when they come into the workplace and their interactions with another human being. You can literally make or break someone's day with how you interact with them for 2 minutes of that time period.
Now that brings us back around to culture. It sounds like every person in the workplace contributes to the culture. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. Every single person, even though my book Culture is the Way, is which we'll probably talk about here in a bit, is primarily intended for, senior leaders, executives, and all people managers. At the end of the day, it may start there, but everybody has a role to play in culture. I think one of the big pushbacks with that is, well, if I'm not the general manager or the senior vice president or the CEO, what real change can I drive with culture? And my number one, response to that is, don't you want to come to a workplace that you envisioned of what makes you happy, what makes you fulfilled? And even if you may not be getting that temporarily from your direct, manager or leader, right? You can still play a role in how you interact and the energy that you bring to the workplace every single day. And that can change. That can change the dynamics of a division, of a business unit, and sometimes even an organization by one person inspiring 3 more people to, operate and behave in a certain way. And then that cascades all throughout the organization. I've seen it before.
So this is really important to me because there are so many toxic workplaces out there. And if someone who has no titular authority can make that big of an impact, that's impressive. So all right, you're just a normal worker in the workplace. How would you begin to make that cultural change?
I think there's 2 things. I think number one, it's identifying, if you are in a toxic environment, what is that relationship like with your manager? The person that you report to, do you have would you say a healthy or toxic relationship with them? What does that look like? The reason why I ask that is because a lot of times there are a lot of people who aren't a manager, people manager, or leader at the present moment, but they may have a great relationship with the person they report to. But then when you ask them, have you actually gone to them in one of your quarterly or monthly one-on-one meetings with your direct manager or boss? Did you bring up to them that this is really bothering me at work, or I see this problem which is hindering and causing so many paralyzing, factors within our team and unit? And 9 times out of 10, you're going to get, no, I haven't brought it up because I'm fearful of what they may think if I bring that up. If I talk about the challenges that I see or the things that rub me the wrong way, then I'm just complaining and I'm fearful of losing my job. And, I always say, like, you cannot create change. And I think especially with where the workplace has kind of grown into this day and age, most leaders, and you're seeing this in a lot of organizations now, they're promoting people to speak up. They're promoting people to talk about the challenges, the issues in the workplace, because the fact is, if you don't know what those are, and if those aren't on the table and aired out every single week, every single month, you're never going to make things better. So I think first and foremost, you have to be willing to get to a place of, how can I bring this up in a way, right, that is, it's respectful. It's respectful of not making my manager or direct leader think like this is a problem because of what they've been doing or not doing. Like, how can I bring this up for the betterment of our team or division or unit? The second thing I would say is, is if you're unhappy in your current situation, but you don't feel that there's a way to change that with your daily behavior, with how you interact with people, that situation or that environment is not going to change. And it may not even change with you changing your behavior, right? Or changing how you interact with others, or you going out of your way or above and beyond to kind of fix a problem that's festering a little bit. But I think at the end of the day, if you don't try, you'll never even know.
Good point.
And I've noticed, By adopting those two specific things. Number one, having the boldness and courage to speak up, have those conversations with your direct manager can produce unbelievable results and shorten a lot of gaps, dysfunctional gaps within teams and organizations. And then the second thing is, don't you want to come to a workplace that you feel fulfilled and you feel inspired? And part of that is, if you're not experiencing that from others, then why don't you set the tone? Why don't you set the tone for, hey, for this Monday, I'm going to go out of my way to, these 5 individuals, I'm going to tell them, I'm going to go into their office. I never go up to that second floor within the headquarters, but I'm going to tell them, good morning. What can I do for you? Or is there anything I can help you with this particular week? Like you setting that foundation. It may seem like a lot of unneeded effort, but I can tell you right now that the transformation that can create by one person being the bigger person and taking those bold, courageous actions, I've personally just seen it move mountains before.
So now that was from, I guess, leadership from below. What about the actual leadership in a company? What should they be doing to improve the culture?
Number one, I kind of lay out in the book a 5-step process to building a world-class culture. And there's different parts to this, but I think that there's really 2 things. When someone asks, what can a senior leadership team be doing, to really drive and build a healthier, higher performing, more positive culture that really not only enhances the workplace environment, but also drives results, right? That's kind of a huge aspect of it too, that we'll kind of talk into, which is a huge misconception about culture. But the 2 things that leaders without a doubt have to do is, number one, they have to take full and complete responsibility for it, and they have to drive it every single day. It's not an initiative that's done on a monthly or quarterly basis, or when we don't have, these important KPIs or objectives that we have to be striving towards. Like, it is a daily effort that has to be intertwined with your daily leadership, with your daily obligations as a leader of that organization, of your team, of your division. It has got to be completely owned by the leadership team, because their behavior sets the tone for the rest of the organization to follow suit. And then the second thing is to define it. Define your culture. I talk in the book a lot about, if you stop 20 employees that work at the same company, let's say you're at a conference and, you're at a dinner and, you're sitting with 10 or 20 different employees from the same exact company, and you ask those 10 or 20 employees, what is the culture at XYZ company? You're most likely going to get 10 or 20 completely different answers. And, to me, that's a major problem, because what that is sending is that everybody has a different perception of what our culture is. And you don't need people to be robots. You don't need people to say exactly the same thing, but you'll notice across the board in all great cultures, whether we're talking about in the NFL or even in the business world, in, organizations, both small, medium, and large, there's a clear distinction between what we define as our culture here. What do we passionately believe in? What mission are we serving? And internally, right, what are the behaviors and characteristics of what we have to live out that is going to help us bring us to that shared understanding of our culture?
So if you were to create a document like that, so many times we create mission documents and value statements, but they kind of go in one ear and out the other. How do you distribute that and make it part of your DNA?
Yeah, another great question. So when I talk about defining your culture, a lot of people may misinterpret that without, reading the context or the book. First is that, one of the things I say in the book is that what I call it, the cultural purpose statement, how we perceive ourselves internally, right? It's not the mission statement. Even though some organizations I work with, they eventually do turn their cultural purpose statement, kind of how they define their culture, even though they do eventually may make it their mission statement. In the beginning, they're kind of separate there, but that internal focus is all about what workplace do we have currently? What workplace do we want to intentionally cultivate and create? And then how does our communication around that fit into a bigger purpose of how you as an employer are going to be impacted positively, personally and professionally, because of the expectations and foundations that we're building as a culture. So if you don't want it to just go in one ear or out the other, you can't solely talk about just winning in the marketplace or how we want to increase profit percentage by 25% for this particular year. You also have to talk about how your culture is going to help people become better mothers, better fathers, better citizens of this world, of this country. And everything is kind of interconnected. And you see the greatest companies in the world, they have that focus that we want to develop the whole person. When you work here, we want to develop the whole person. And our values, most importantly, a lot of people are going to call them the core values. I call them repeated behaviors. It does nothing if you just post core values on your website, or you have that the monthly shareholder meeting or your board meeting, or the annual meeting, right? Those values have to be clearly articulated of what behaviors do we have to repeatedly live and carry out to bring this particular value to life. So when you kind of do all of that, and all of your communication strategy is kind of interconnected between those, three focus areas, you're going to create much more of an impact than just, reading off values or handing out a document and telling people to buy into that.
Is there a way to measure your growth in living that culture?
Yeah, there's numerous of ways to measure that. I think, particularly towards the end of the book, one of the very first things I talk about is that, kind of what I hit on it a little bit in the very beginning there about one of the biggest misconceptions about culture. But people think that culture is meant, I get to do whatever I want. I report to a manager that doesn't challenge me ever. There's never any conflict in the workplace that is healthy. It's every time I have a smile on my face. I get along with all my colleagues. We have sleep pods in every single level of the headquarters, right? I get off on Friday at 3:45 p.m. I can wear whatever I want to work and show up to meetings whenever I want. That's not culture. Those are perks. And the problem a lot of leaders, have, is what I've discovered the past 12 years, is they confuse perks for culture. So the very first thing to do is, like, if you really want to measure relentlessly what your culture is doing for driving the business, really what the sole intention of culture is for, of course, we want to build a better, more inspiring, healthier workplace. But the other aspect of that is it has to produce for us in the marketplace. Like, it has to bring our, commercial, our go-to-market strategy to life. Strategy does not achieve itself on its own. That's the job of culture. It's really behavior at scale. So it's taking that and focusing on looking at the different avenues of what you could do. So, for example, right, almost every company in the world has employee surveys, but what every company in the world doesn't do is they don't relentlessly and rigorously track and monitor those employee surveys. They do that because it's a check the box item. Like, okay, we have our employee survey done. Now we can move on. Or the leadership team may get together for only one meeting and talk about, here are our results, but there's not going to be any town hall meetings after that. There's not going to be any, quarterly or monthly strategic meetings about getting the employee voice, highlighting that about what we could do to highlight these 3 or 4 items that were a concern for us for an employee survey. And then the other aspect of what can we do to measure it, it's, what is that business? What is that success? As far as, your gross profit margin, what are you doing in the market? What is the competitive landscape like? How are you navigating through the complexities of, the current work environment, which really every sector is dealing with right now? I mean, so there's multiple ways to do that, but at the end of the day, and really everyone knows what those areas are, but the biggest barrier to most leaders and organizations is they do not make it routine practice. It's a check the box item. We're going to do this because we have to. And there's not rigorous and relentless follow-up from those results.
I honestly believe your book is going to transform the workplace. This is such good stuff. And I love your distinction between perks and culture, because I think you're right. The different places I've worked where they lean into this concept of culture, it's all perks, or it's something they announce, this is our word for the year, and you never hear anything else about it.
Yeah, I talk about that all in the book, because you are 100% correct. It is, I even think still to this day, it's gotten a little bit better, but that is the biggest barrier to most organizations building a what they can deem, whatever that is, a world-class culture. What they believe is a culture that's really going to not only enhance the workplace well-being of their employees, but also commercially it's going to make them be more successful in the marketplace. And I think that without a doubt, it's probably one of the biggest challenges that I deal with in my day-to-day work of actually going into organizations. And, it's one of the very first things I discover is that usually 9 times out of 10, that senior leadership team, you'll have a couple individuals that understand, the intrinsic importance of culture, but at scale, what you'll see is a huge misconception of what it is. So they already lost the battle right there. The game is already lost with you having that misconception of what it is. And then from there, it's having the balancing act, I like to call it. Because if you go too far on, hey, we want to build a more inspiring culture, or, the employee survey said that we don't have psychological safety in the workplace. So then if you have too many leaders and people managers go too far down that road and they also neglect the performance side, then you also have disaster just in a completely different way. So there has to be communication around, we want to build a healthier company, a healthier organization. It's very important to us. We want you to speak up. We want you to be vulnerable. We want you to be transparent. We want you to really be proud of where you work. But on the flip side, we also want to win. Right? We also want to win. We want to go into the marketplace. We want to provide an exceptional value to our, customers, suppliers, clients, whatever that may be in your particular line of work. And it's continually driving that balance act of building a healthier organization, but also utilizing and building a culture that enhances the performance in the marketplace.
Incredible. So all of this and more is in Matt's book, Culture is the Way: How Leaders at Every Level Build an Organization for Speed, Impact, and Excellence. So Matt, tell us a little bit about the book. I know we've talked about some of what's in it, but when can they get it, where, and what do you hope they'll take away from it?
Yeah, so the book comes out officially. I don't know when they'll be listening to this conversation, but it comes out Wednesday, February 1st, and you can get it wherever books are sold, Amazon or Barnes and Noble, whatever that may be for where you get your books at. And really for me, I wrote this book. The inspiration behind it is because, really, as I mentioned, for the past 12 years, not only, becoming a keynote speaker and delivering just speeches, but along that way, one of the big issues that I had is, organizations, let's say I would go give a 60-minute keynote presentation to, Allstate Insurance or, another company, right? The whole conversation was, hey, Matt, this was great and inspired our employees, but, what can we do to kind of keep this going on a monthly basis, on a daily basis, on a quarterly basis, yearly basis, to really take these best practices and these philosophies and mentalities and embed it in our organization at scale. And that's what started my consulting practice. And this book was birthed because the number one question I get is, hey, we're inspired by this, and this looks great, but like, how do we actually do that from a ground zero, whether we're trying to go through a complete cultural transformation or whether if we're trying to just tweak certain aspects of our existing culture? Like, what is a framework, or what is a game plan, a playbook that we can actually start that process and actually implement it into our daily life and our particular organization? Because the number one issue, there's a lot of academic books out there. I'm a huge fan of those. I did say that in the book, like in the very beginning. This is not one of those books. I do have some data in there, some studies, research, some case studies, personal case studies. But I wanted to take a very complex subject matter, such as workplace culture, and be able to distill it down to a level that is actionable, but also practical. And I think that's hopefully what the reader will be able to get out of this book is, A, understand the importance of culture, but then B, understand how do I actually start to implement this into my daily team or my daily organization or company? And then how can we consistently become culture drivers?
That's amazing. Okay, everybody, this book or this interview is going to be everywhere where you find me. I'm also going to include this book as our monthly book club book. So if you have joined me on Amazon, it's part of my book club, you're going to see this book more. And I hope you'll just dive into it and really learn from it, because Matt has so much to share, everything he's learned, not just on the football field, but also in business. This is truly going to make a difference. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you so much, Catherine. I really appreciate you having me. It was an honor.